All right, guys, this is Evan with Summers Wellness. As always, I'm here with Dana from Whole Health Dana. This is our weekly educational course on essential oils and using essential oils. This one is being recorded on May 15th, 2016. We're talking about the distillation process, the harvesting and processing of essential oils and plant products that make our essential oils. A real passion for me in this industry, because most people don't realize how many things can go wrong in this particular piece of the puzzle. And it wasn't until I started digging in and doing some research for myself that I started to recognize and realize all of the breakdowns that could occur. I'm going to show a 5-minute video in just a few minutes to give you guys a little bit of understanding. It was actually done by Discovery Channel, showing how the distillation process itself works. So I'm going to show that here in a few minutes. But let's just to give you a little bit of a background. Every essential oil, your better quality products are going to come from where the plants grow indigenously, where they grow naturally in the wild. When you harvest that plant material, think about even things that you might grow at home. Everything has a growing term. You could be looking at plants that take, let's just arguably say a year to come to full maturity. If you have a farmer who's trying to cut costs, or they're trying to cut down on or increase their profit, they may harvest their plant material in lesser time. So if a plant takes a year to mature, they may choose to harvest at 9 months, thus basically adding 25% more profit because they can turn their fields over that much faster. When they do something like that, they're inhibiting the purity of their product, the potency of their product. It could still be 100% pure, but it's not going to be as potent because the plant hasn't grown to full maturity yet. Some essential oils, some plants may actually take 2 or 3 years to fully come to maturity. So some of those oils that are a lot more expensive that we see, oftentimes it's because they have a very long growing process. Sometimes they're very hard to harvest. Sometimes they're not very sustainable. So all of those things will factor into the price of your end product, which would be the essential oils. In addition to the harvesting of the plant material, the way the plant material is harvested will also make a difference. If your plants are hand-picked as opposed to machined, you have a better chance of sustainability on the land. When things are processed and picked by machine, often the land suffers. So you have to start from scratch all over again, and the land usually isn't as fertile for future generations and for future crop yields. Then when you start to look at the distillation process itself, every oil has a different type of distillation that is required. So every plant will have a different amount of distillation that's required to get your best quality oil. 2 things to factor when you start looking at that. Number 1 is the temperature in which you are steam distilling. So some plants require a low steam, a low temperature steam to distill the plant material properly. Others would require a high yield, a high steam, higher temperature in order to get the oil out of the plant material. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the length of time that you would distill your plant material to get your essential oil. Some plants will require a 8-hour distillation. Others could require 16. Others might require 36 to get all of the oil out of the plant material that's usable. If we want to talk about shortchanging that process, remember this is a lengthy, expensive process to go through. If you have a producer who's trying to improve their profit margin, they may cut their temperature down because it costs more money to run high heat. They may cut down the amount of time that they've distilled the plant material, so they may not get as high a yield, but they can turn the product over faster. They may not get as high a therapeutic value out of the oil because they are speeding up the process and they're not getting all of the components and all the constituents out of the distillation process. I find this entire process incredibly fascinating. As you can tell, Dana has seen my knowledge just on this process alone grow exponentially in the last year, because I've taught her everything I know, and every time we talk about it, I'm teaching her something new because I've uncovered something new. And the reason I'm so passionate about this is I was that guy when I first started. I was buying essential oils strictly on price. I figured, you know, a can of 10W30 is the same as a can of 10W30. So a bottle of peppermint is the same as a bottle of peppermint. Didn't matter what brand, what company, it was all the same. And it wasn't until I really started to dig into some of this process that I've come to really appreciate the labor, the effort, the time, and the money investment by these farmers and these people, these companies that get involved in producing and creating essential oils. So that's why I'm trying to share some of that. So beyond the distillation process, the other part of this that gets very important is also understanding the bottling and the creation of your end product. So you may have seen the picture that was on this event that kind of shows a rudimentary still. That's going to I'm going to show that. I'm going to actually show that video here in a moment. But when we distill our essential oils, when we distill the plant material, it's just like the distillation process that we all learned in elementary or middle school, when we ran that experiment and we created distilled water in school. You're running temperature, heat, through the plant material. It's lifting the oils out of the plant with the steam. So as the steam rises, it's carrying oils upwards through the still, and it's going to find its easiest place to escape, which is going to be through a tube that begins the condensation process, because the tube itself is cooler than the steam where it started. As the product cools, it falls into a retaining tank, and because oil and water separate, the water rests on the bottom, the oil finds its way to the top. So you have a differentiator. So you've got essential oil on top, and you have what's called a hydrosol, which is an essential oil enhanced water that will be below it. So the same way, if you poured olive oil into a glass of water and you let that sit for a few seconds, you will almost immediately see the olive oil rise to the top of the glass, and the water is going to sit at the bottom, and there's a defined line between the two. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. I want to show you guys this video. It's a 5-minute video. It has sound with it. If you guys don't hear it, please let me know. And I'll make sure that I can try to turn it up so you guys can hear it. But you should be able to hear it as well. Let's see.
Vandula angustifolia might sound like the name of an ancient Roman emperor, but it's actually the scientific name for the lavender plant. The leaves and striking blue petals of this aromatic flowering shrub are used to make lavender essential oil, an ingredient in many health and beauty products. Lavender essential oil has antiviral, antibacterial, and anti-inflammatory properties. No wonder it's long been a natural remedy for many ailments. And with its flowery fragrance and relaxant effects, it's also a common ingredient in lotions, soaps, and bath oils. Lavender is a perennial plant that begins flowering in its second year. Harvest time at this Canadian farm is in July, at the peak of the first bloom. There's a second bloom afterward, but not significant enough to warrant another harvest. Weeds like to grow at the base of lavender plants, siphoning off water and important soil nutrients. So between May and September, killing those weeds is a vital daily ritual. The weeding machine lifts the lavender stems out of the way, then blasts the weeds around the base with a death blow of hot steam. To determine the right time to harvest, the producer looks at the quantity of blooms and the color of the flowers. They should be purple-blue, on the verge of turning grayish-brown. The producer also crushes a few petals to see how much oil comes out. The harvester is specially designed for cutting lavender. Like a stylist cutting hair, it pulls the stems straight up, then snips near the base. The cut stems, about 40 centimeters long, fall onto a conveyor belt, which moves them into a tray. From there, workers manually transfer the lavender to the harvester's trailer. When the trailer is full, the harvester delivers its load to the on-site distillery. Workers load the lavender into a still, a large stainless steel vessel typically used to produce alcoholic spirits, but in this case, lavender oil. They compact as much lavender as possible into the still to prevent the formation of air pockets. The less air, the greater the oil yield. Once the still is stuffed to compacted capacity, they close it tightly and start up an oil-fired boiler. The boiler heats water into steam, which they then inject into the bottom of the still at very low pressure. Over the course of about 15 minutes, the steam slowly rises to the top of the still, heating the lavender along the way. They continue the steam for another half hour or so. This bursts the glands located primarily in the petals, to a lesser extent in the leaves and stems, releasing the oil. To collect that extracted oil, they feed cold water into a coiled pipe running through the still. When the hot steam hits that cold pipe, it condenses, transforming back into water. Only now, that water contains lavender oil. They open the still's tap and let the water flow into a holding tank. On average, the proportions are 1 part lavender oil to 40 parts water. In the holding tank, over the next hour or so, the oil naturally separates and rises to the surface. At that point, they begin pumping the water to another container, stopping at the first sign of oil. What remains in the tank is the final product, pure lavender essential oil. The pumped out water is a secondary product called lavender floral water. The producer sends both products to a laboratory to be filtered. Besides selling lavender oil and floral water as ingredients to manufacturers of health and beauty products, producers often design their own lines of lavender creations for pampering the body and soul.
Okay, so that whole process, I'm sure you guys will can appreciate that. That is something that I actually had never seen that video before I did this. And I just went ahead and unmuted all of you guys. So no cursing, no swearing, no yelling at people that are watching the replay. That is basically the process for most essential oils. Your citrus oils are generally cold pressed as opposed to steam distilled, but most of your essential oils are steam distilled in that same process. So the three primary differentiators when it comes to the distillation process, technically I guess 4, would be the harvest, number 1. Number 2 would be the pressure within the still itself. 3 is the temperature, and 4 is the time. Those 4 factors can all drastically impact the quality of the essential oil that you receive. And if you want to look at a fifth one, the fifth one could be the density in which they pack the still. So like the video was saying, the more air pockets in that still, the less of a yield you're going to get out of the essential oil, out of the plant material. So those 5 differentiators are going to be what separates a good quality, more expensive essential oil compared to some of your cheaper off-the-shelf brand oils that may not have all of the full components and constituents to them. In addition to that, some companies will add carrier oils, so they'll actually lessen the amount of oil in the bottle, and they'll pre-dilute it to help inflate their profits as well. So it's really important when you start buying essential oils to know the company that you're buying from, to trust the company that you're buying from, so you know the source, you know where they're coming from. That particular video was showing lavender fields in Canada. I know doTERRA primarily gets their lavender from France. Young Living gets a lot of their essential oil, their lavender essential oil, in combination of international farms as well as farms that they hold themselves in Utah. They've gotten, they get stuff from all over that they combine. So it's a matter of where the stuff is coming from. That's really important to understand. So if you guys have any questions, have any comments, feel free to unmute yourself. Jay, you're already unmuted.
Thanks.
But if you guys have any questions about it, if you want to know more, please. I mean, this is your Q&A. So if you've got any questions on the distillation process or the video, please speak up.
So some things don't need the heat process. Did you say citrus is one of those?
Yeah, citrus oils are generally cold pressed. So that means basically it's done by pressure, by extreme pressure.
Yeah.
In citrus oils, there are very few that get steam distilled.
So how do these farmers know what to do with, have they been trained somehow, or how do they know?
That's a great question. And actually, believe it or not, it's actually the perfect time for you to have asked that question, because I kind of got an answer to that. Heather, I'll answer that question for you in just a minute. I kind of got an answer to that, Rhonda, this week when I met the CEO of doTERRA. One of the things that I can only speak for doTERRA in this regard, I can't speak for any other company, and until this week I couldn't even speak for them. When the representatives from doTERRA go around the world and they meet farmers that have these farms in their villages or just outside their villages in their control, they will go in and they will actually help them set up their stills. In some cases, these are farmers and villages that have been doing this process for generations. And they've kind of tweaked their system through the years, but through experimentation and generational knowledge, they've shared their history of being able to produce this type of product. Essential oils have been around for years. Taking plant material and using strict plant material for medicinal purposes goes back to the ancient Chinese. So a lot, this is going back many, many, many generations in some cases. But if there's a farmer, if there's a village, if there are people that aren't meeting the doTERRA standard, they'll get with them and they will work with them and help train them to bring them up to the standard that doTERRA requires for their oils. Now, I can't speak for any of the others. I wish I could, but I wouldn't want to misrepresent another company by saying something that's not true. Like I said, I only found this information out because we had the pleasure of having the CEO for doTERRA in town doing a presentation for us this week. Heather, you asked, why would a company combine plant materials or combine oil to produce a batch? It's for consistency. When a company has multiple farms under their control, and technically, if you think about it, most companies do this because every harvest, every location, every farm, even within the same country, even in the same field, each plant that's harvested will have a slightly different chemical composition. But as long as the overall oil that's being produced meets within the company's standard, then it becomes an acceptable product to put out to the public. Just like every person on the planet, even though we're all human, we all have different characteristics. The same can be said even for neighboring plants that are growing side by side in the same field. Dana, anything you want to add?
No, but I had some questions for you also.
Okay, go ahead.
So this may not, I don't even know if this is something you know the answer to. It just, while I was watching the video, it kind of made me wonder. I'm always protecting my essential oils from heat.
Right.
So it doesn't break down, it's chemical components that make them so powerful. And I'm kind of wondering, why? I guess I'm kind of wondering why, because these oils are produced with heat. So presumably at the time of, when they're being taken from the stills, they're quite hot to begin with.
Right.
Why is it that the heat's okay during the distillation process, but not okay once it's been bottled and sent to my house?
Because once the oil has been produced, has come from the plant material, it starts to oxidize. Okay. Now, and I can also use, for example, cardamom, because this is one that was specifically talked about at this presentation this week. Cardamom, when these guys harvest cardamom, they're in a pod, similar to looking at peas in a pod. What they have to do is they have to open up those cardamom pods, get the seeds out of those pods, and they have to dry them within 12 hours because they're losing potency, they're losing their energy because they're highly aromatic. So they're losing their potential over any amount of time once they've been picked. So with cardamom, they have to dry those berries, dry those seeds within 12 hours. Now, once they're dry, they can then process those and put those through the steam distillation process to get the essential oils pretty much an unlimited amount of time. But if they don't dry them in time, they can throw the entire harvest away because they're not going to get the yield because they're basically going to lose all their potency. Similar to your question on if the plant material is being processed at a high steam temperature, a high heat temperature, why can't your oil be at a high temperature? Once you've pulled the oil out of the plant, you've now altered the stability of what the plant was holding. And the oil begins to oxidize after the fact. When you raise the temperature, you're speeding up the oxidation process, and that can cut down on the life of your oil, and in some cases can actually turn them toxic.
Okay, that makes sense. Sorry, I was trying to read Heather's comment.
Yeah, I'm reading Heather's comment now. So Heather asked that plant chemical constituents are like a fingerprint, that when you combine plant material or oil of different plants, would it compromise the fingerprint? I can see where you're coming from on that one, Heather, but if you think about it, yes, you would essentially be kind of muddying the water, so to speak, but like a fingerprint, every plant is going to have a slightly different one. I mean, they'll still fall within the same chemical chain. So the chemical chain itself, I look at as the fingerprint. But when you look at the, you can even say, I'll cut it at 100. But in a lot of cases, the different components of an essential oil there can be up to 200 or so different chemical components that make up an essential oil. When you look at, if you get the chance to look at a GCMS report, which is the gas chromatography mass spectrometry report, you'll see a breakdown of all of the different chemical constituents that make up an essential oil. And there's an acceptable range for those individual chemical chains. But each of those chemical chains are a fingerprint. Okay, so you have a multitude of those that make up that individual essential oil. And it could be anywhere from 40 to 50% of one constituent, all the way down to 0.0001%. So minuscule that most companies won't even identify them on their reports.
I had one other question.
Okay.
So there's there's an MLM company out there that sells organic, certified organic essential oils.
Right.
And I've looked at their website, and they make a really big deal about saying that all of their essential oils are first distillation.
Right.
But I thought all oils really are first distillation.
Okay, so you got two things in there.
Okay.
Number one, I'll address the organic claim. The only part of the world where organic matters is in the US. And that's because, okay, let me amend that. In the larger countries around the world. So in the US, in Europe, Canada, in the parts of the world that would frequently utilize pesticides, that could afford to use pesticides, organic matters. Unfortunately, there's no international standard for organic. So when something is claimed to be certified organic, you can only certify the plant material that's grown in the US, because the USDA can only certify things that are grown here. There is no international body. The second part of the certified organic claim that some of these essential oil companies make, because there's no backing for it, they can claim whatever they want. There's no oversight. There's no regulation to make sure they're speaking the truth. Most countries around the world where you can harvest and process essential oils when you get them from an indigenous region are so poor that they couldn't possibly afford to buy the pesticides that countries like the US are using in order to take care of their fields. So I'm going to use frankincense as an example. Frankincense gathered, but doTERRA gets their frankincense from Somalia and Oman. If you guys know anything about the financial situation of those two countries, you've got a majority of the population that lives in such poverty that they couldn't even afford normal housing. They can't afford schooling. In a lot of cases, they can't even afford basic clothing and basic necessities. They sure cannot afford pesticides to spray on their fields. Most of these countries are using old school farming methods where they don't need pesticides because the ground turns itself over with multiple crops that feed into the ground and into the soil, which act as its own natural pesticide and herbicide for that matter. Your second question was on, remind me, Dana.
First distillation.
Thank you. Every essential oil, and the distillation number is a big myth in the world of essential oils. In fact, I covered it on my Periscope on my myth week on Periscope. The only essential oil that is multiple distill is Lang Lang. And Lang Lang has 5 different distillation processes that it can go through. And the reason that Lang Lang is done that way is because it is the single most popular essential oil in the perfume industry. So you'll see Lang Lang 1, Lang Lang 2, Lang Lang 3, Lang Lang Complete, and Lang Lang Extra. Those are the 5 different distillations of Lang Lang. The first distillation of Lang Lang is usually very short. They don't run the plant material through the full process. They just want that highly floral aroma, and that's usually what's purchased by the perfume industry because it is very, very inexpensive. It's plentiful, it's inexpensive, it's little more than a hydrosol, but that's what they're buying. I know that is usually where the misunderstanding will come from. The big companies, your better named companies with essential oils, will primarily use Lang Lang Complete because they're running the plant material through its entire process to get the full distillation out of it. The misnomer about our company only uses the first distillation as opposed to a second or third that other companies use. If you think about it, if you took a tea bag and you let a tea bag seep in your cup for an hour, and then you took that tea bag out and you put it into another cup of hot water, after an hour of letting it steep, would there be any tea left in that bag to make its way into the new cup? Likely not, because you've drawn all of the tea out of that bag already. That's the same scenario when you are distilling your essential oil, when you're distilling your plant material. If you've done it correctly, and there's let's say a 16-hour process to distill that plant that you have, once the 16 hours are up, you have nothing left in the still but fertilizer, because you've taken all of the plant material, all of the oil out of that plant. Now you take that spent plant material and you spread it back on the ground as fertilizer to fertilize your next crop load. Yes, I said crop load, not crap load.
Funny, thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Heather wants to know, the U.S. only bans 11 toxic chemicals, the European Union in excess of 1,100. I can't verify exact numbers on that one for you, Heather. I know that's really close. The U.S. does very little to ban toxic chemicals. A lot of especially your multi-level marketing, sorry, brain doesn't work after I got into my accident this week. Cosmetics companies. A lot of your multi-level marketing cosmetic companies are actually based in Europe instead of the US because of that fact alone. Because if they can pass in Europe, if they can be brought to market in Europe with all of the things that Europe bans, they know they can be accepted worldwide. So that's why you see a lot of those companies that are based over there as opposed to here. All right, do you guys have any other questions on the distillation process and the processing of oils?
Just curious, Evan.
Yeah, Jay.
Do we share any of our crops with anybody else, or are they all ours?
80% of the doTERRA essential oils are proprietary. Now, again, I can only speak for doTERRA in this regard. I can't speak for any other company. The way a lot of other companies work is they do massive quantity and they sell to a middleman who then sells to a distributor who then rebottles and then sends, and sells to other companies that rebottle their own stuff by the time it gets to market. As far as the doTERRA oils are concerned, 80% of the oils that doTERRA puts out for us, they are exclusive to doTERRA, meaning those farmers can only produce for the one company.
That's good.
Yep, and that's part of the goal that doTERRA has in place, because when they make the claim that they have the highest quality essential oils on the planet, they want to be able to confidently claim that knowing that the oils that they get cannot be obtained by anybody else.
Good.
So that's, again, coming straight from the CEO's mouth this week. Another fact that I had no idea about until Thursday.
Yeah. Very cool, though.
Yeah. Rhonda, any other questions on the distillation process?
No, it's really interesting. Thank you very much for doing that. Appreciate it. Yeah, I really didn't know anything about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely welcome. Like I said, I never thought about it. For me, it was completely, an afterthought. I had no idea what went into this process. And I guarantee you that I will probably continue to learn more. And I cannot wait for my first international trip where I get to go to one of these farms and actually watch the process happen live.
Yeah, I'd be interested in their machinery and stuff.
Yeah,
in
I'm so looking forward to
it. Where they're very poor, what their methods are, and how we check for quality control under all these different circumstances.
Yeah, and there's so many places during that process where an oil can be adulterated, it can be altered, the quality can break down, which is why I always tell people, whether it's with doTERRA or not with doTERRA, you have to do your own research to know what essential oil company you feel closest to, what you resonate with, the one that you feel most comfortable with their process, because ultimately you're buying something that is therapeutic, that is medicinal, that is, done for your health. And the last thing you want to do is cheapen that purchase in order for you to get yourself, in the best of health in the fastest amount of time.
Yeah.
I asked the question, would you trust birth control from the dollar store?
I love that. Every time you say that, I get a kick out of it.
So, all right, I'm gonna close out the recording and then we'll open it up for an open Q&A. Let me go ahead and do that. Thank you guys. Those of you that are watching, you're stealing that one, Heather. Nice. For those of you that are watching the recording, I hope you got something out of this. If you have any questions on the distillation process, or if you have any questions on how this process works, or any comments, you are more than welcome to send me a message at Summers Wellness on Facebook, or you can send me an email at summerswellnesscoach@gmail.com, or you can send an email to Dana at, go ahead, Dana.
wholehealthdana@gmail.com.
I didn't want to screw it up. My brain's not working. So wholehealthdana@gmail.com. Either one of us would be more than happy to answer your questions, if you have any whatsoever. So please just reach out to us if you've got any questions.